Hello everyone, this is Darius from the Shotcaller, and today I'm not going to interview a different pro player, but rather talk about a very important topic that has been very current within the last couple of weeks, and that is the fans' attitude towards teams and players, and why, to an extent, this needs to change. Now, in the recent weeks, we've had some drama, essentially, some uproar about roster decisions. First up, we had Cloud9 benching 3 of their star players in Jensen, Sneaky, and Smoothie for their academy counterparts, essentially. And we also had Meteos getting traded away by 100 Thieves for Anda from FlyQuest, which has been a very hot topic the last couple of days, last couple of hours, / the last day. And I want to talk about the first impression attitude that needs to change from fans and people on Reddit and social media and stuff, because the initial reaction to both of these cases were, what the fuck are these teams doing, right? Cloud9 got a lot of shit for their decision making, even though none of us knew the context of those decisions. The same applied to Meteos. He put out a tweet saying, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I don't know. This just happened to me. I am the victim, essentially. And everyone was like, wow, 100 Thieves, how could you do that? I thought you were a player-first organization, Nate Shot. How could you do this? Yada, yada. Since then, both teams / owners have put out statements that essentially clarified their perspective. And in the case of 100 Thieves specifically, I think this really changed the perspective. 100 Thieves disclosed that Meteos was looking for a trade, and that, essentially the team decided, okay, well, our best trade that we can get right now would be Anda, and he'll be starting week 4 for us. And that's just pretty much it from our perspective. Bye-bye, Meteos. It was fun having you here. See you next time. And now Meteos was obviously unhappy with that decision. He has said that he will make a video disclosing his perspective, so maybe there is more to the story. But according to the official press statement of the team, it seems relatively clear. And most people that have now commented and have now made videos on it, such as Mark Z, have said that, okay, now this all kind of makes sense. I don't get, it shouldn't make sense why 100 Thieves get so much shit thrown at them for a decision that is very rational. In the case of Cloud9, of course, we can disagree with the decision because, the competitive results so far have been lackluster. Cloud9 is in last place with, 1 win, 5 losses. But they've already made some changes. They got Jensen back in, they got Smoothie back in. And at the end of the day, even though it seemed very interesting at the start, the decision, was a competitive one, and I think that's very much justifiable to say, okay, these guys are not taking the game seriously. These guys are working their asses off, so therefore we're gonna swap them out because one player is working hard and the other one isn't, and going against that, saying that they wouldn't swap would be going against the competitive idea of League of Legends. And at the end of the day, NALCS and EULCS are competitions. And I think that's something that fans specifically, need to understand as well, because a lot of people reacted like, oh no, C9 is over, I don't want to support them anymore, and yada yada. But if you are watching the teams because of the players only, then you should probably tune into their private streams to their YouTube channel rather than the NALCS competition, because it is competition. It is about who makes first, second, third place, and not about who has the biggest amount of biggest amount of entertainment or other odd factors that are not relevant in the competitive space. But a lot of eSports fans and League fans seem to conflict the two, and again, that is not something that is healthy when looking at a competition, a competitive team like Cloud9, because again, they followed through with the competitive idea, but the backlash of the community was really harsh because it was against the entertainment idea that the community liked so much. Now, the problem this creates is, and from my perspective, talking with team owners and stuff, actually a lot bigger than people might realize, because team owners and managers and coaches from my perspective, are a lot more reluctant to make difficult roster decisions in esports compared to traditional sports from my experience. And that, again, is a bad scenario to be in when you are in a competitive environment, because you want to get the best competitive result. That's the point of playing in the NALCS, or at least it should be. But when there are too many people disagreeing with that core idea, there's a huge conflict of interests between the teams and what the fans apparently want, or at least some of them, at least the very vocal ones. It also creates a level of instability, because teams are worried that if I bench this player, or if I trade this player, will his fan base, which make up 20-30% of my team's fan base, move with him to the new team? That's a huge issue. And multiple teams have faced this and have faced the consequence to an extent. CLG losing first Doublelift and then Afromu, from my perspective, really hurt the brand in terms of interaction and stuff like that. I barely see CLG fans on Reddit or Twitter anymore these days. Might be bias, of course, I just go through the hashtags and everything, but just from my personal perspective, I think a lot of people moved teams when the players moved teams, and that's pretty common. We saw that when Reckless went to Elements. Stuff like this isn't really all that surprising, and it is an issue because when teams are not really in charge, not really in power, it becomes a very difficult scenario. It's a very high risk scenario for teams, because they go like, okay, hey, Mr. Sponsor, I want your money for putting your brand on my jersey. But then the sponsor goes like, well, if your star player leaves, then the majority of people that we want to reach are going to leave as well. So why would we give you money? That's such a high risk scenario, and especially with contracts being relatively short in esports compared to traditional sports, that just adds up and piles up, and it's probably one of the reasons why LCS teams are struggling when it comes to sponsorship, specifically in the EU LCS, but also to an extent in the NLCS, because from what I know, in both leagues there are multiple teams that are operating at a loss essentially, and are funding their way through, surviving through funding from VCs and stuff, but are operating at a net loss, and that's in general a problem. When there are multiple teams in the scene that technically could be bankrupt if funding wouldn't be there, and yeah, that's not a healthy perspective to be in, and no fan should be in favor of such a position. Now, it's only natural that we like pro players more than teams, at least in esports, because in esports, and this is one of the amazing thing about esports, is that the fan interaction between pro player and fan is really, really amazing. It's large, it's very interactive. So what I mean by that is, if I text or if I tweet someone like a pro player on Twitter, there's at least a decent chance he might reply to it, or he might fav it, so I see that he's seen it. Putting my opinion on Reddit and a lot of people agreeing with it might end up with the pro player reading it, because we are all somewhat in the same ecosphere. Whereas in traditional sports, the best way I can relate to a pro player would be through what the team does in terms of content. So, for example, Arsenal FC does a fantastic job at doing content with their players. Werder Bremen does a fantastic job at that as well. Or through third-party media, The Guardian does fantastic stuff on football. Mundial Mag, Elf Freunde, Socrates Magazine, fantastic football magazines that bring you personal stories. But the players themselves don't really do all that much. There are a few exceptions to this rule. Some of them are active on social media and doing a good job at that, but the vast majority of them don't. And that makes it very hard for people to connect with them to an extent. Now, there's also, of course, the option of streaming on YouTube, which is another great way for esports players to connect with their people. But this thing that, at the end of the day, this is great, but at the same time, teams in esports have already really started to catch up to this, right? If you look at Team Liquid, the amount of stuff Team Liquid does is actually amazing for you as a fan, right? So they make special jerseys for MSI or now for Rift Rivals. Great stuff. They have one of the best content teams in esports, which puts out stuff, you know, like their regular series, but also stuff like, you know, Breaking Point. And even though it obviously there are some issues there, it's great insight and it's great content from a team that they want to provide to you as a fan. TSM does this, Fnatic does this, Misfits, again, amazing content team. And even if it's stuff like Unicorns of Love making a funny picture, a funny team picture right in front of every match, I still think that the value that teams bring to the scene should be valued a lot higher than it currently is. Of course, it's always easier to connect with a face. It's always easier to connect with someone whose emotions you can see and, you know, you can relate to, who makes jokes and stuff like that, rather than a brand, you know, which is a bit more faceless. But still, I think some of these orgs also have fantastic social media teams, and they really care about players at this point. Of course, there are orgs that don't do that, right? I do think that the franchising in NALCS has improved this somewhat, that they weeded out orgs that didn't do that. And I would assume the same will go for the EU LCS partnership system once that is all done, that, you know, looking at which teams truly interact with their fan base and which doesn't seem to care, which ones don't seem to care. But at the end of the day, if you to wrap it all up, I want you to essentially do two things. So first, I want you to keep calm after roster news break and look at what the team has to say about the decision, right? Because in both cases, Cloud9 and 100 Thieves, we needed more context to fully understand the situation. I think even in Cloud9's case, it was immediately disclosed, but maybe not to the vast extent that it should have. And in the case of 100 Thieves, you know, the statement made things very clear in the perspective of many people, but only after people have been witch hunting the organization / Nadeshot for 16, 20 odd hours. And that stuff can really hurt teams. As I mentioned before, stability is really rare in esports, and we need to try to be as calm as possible and let teams put down their perspective and then make judgment. If they still screwed up from our perspective, sure, make your opinion heard. Totally for that, but let's wait until all the facts are there. This applies to me as well, of course. I was very negatively surprised at the Cloud9 changes, and I shouldn't have reacted that way potentially on Twitter as well. So this is something for me to take note of as well. And additionally, try to really become a fan of a team rather than specific players, because at the end of the day, if you only watch for a few players, I get why you do it, but at the same time, like, the risk of the person just leaving, you know, or the person getting traded to a different team, and all of a sudden all your merch becomes useless and that kind of stuff, that really can't be the goal to support something in esports. Supporting a team, at least when they've made franchising / the partnership system, it gives you a lot more stability as well. And some of these teams have put in such an amazing effort that they really do, or that they really should get rewarded for that. And I hope you do the same. Maybe consider, you know, just buying a jersey for a team, which would be really cool. Maybe even consider buying a jersey without a name on the back, just to truly say, no, I'm a G2 fan, period. You know, I'm a Unicorns fan, period. I'm a Schalke fan, period. You know, I'm a TSM fan, period. Because in the long run, it's only going to reward you. And I know a lot of fans that are fans of teams and that have stick through thick and thin. And at the end of the day, it's always going to be, there's always going to be a history with you and the team. Whereas with the player, you know, you go like, oh, right, back then he was still on CLG. Yeah, that's interesting. But now I hate those guys because he's not on CLG anymore. I don't know. I find that conflicting. And it doesn't reward the hard work that these organizations have put in. Anyway, that was my quick ramble about the state of organizations versus players, or the attitude of fans towards organizations / players. And I hope you took something away from this, and maybe voice your opinion down in the comments. I very much appreciate that. On Twitter, wherever you can find me, Reddit as well, of course. If you have any more suggestions or anything you'd like to say, always open to anything. But this was pretty much it from me for today. I hope you have a good day. See you then.